Look, all I'm saying is that if you're going to invade Earth, maybe don't start with Australia. Captain Sarah Chen massaged her temples as she stared at the holographic display showing the complete decimation of the Vraxixi invasion force. I mean, seriously, the wildlife there makes your bioengineered monstrosities look like stuffed animals. High Commander Zextal's crystalline features twisted into what passed for confusion among his species. His iridescent skin flickered between shades of purple and green as he processed this information. But our strategic analysis indicated it was the least defended continent with the lowest population density. Yeah, that should have been your first clue something was wrong. Sarah couldn't help but grin. There's a reason for that, buddy. The gathering of alien diplomats in the United Earth Emergency Response Center shifted uncomfortably. This was supposed to be their moment of triumph, their carefully orchestrated takeover of humanity's homeworld. Instead, they were watching footage of their most advanced bioweapons being absolutely wrecked by local wildlife. Is that a small furry creature boxing with our Phase 3 combat unit? Admiral Yerxis squinted her compound eyes at the display. That's a kangaroo, mate. The Australian representative, James Cooper, couldn't keep the pride out of his voice. And your robot just got its arse handed to it by a mother with a joey in her pouch. Wait till you see what the cassowaries did to your ground forces. The footage switched to show a large, flightless bird with brilliant blue and red markings, systematically dismantling what was supposed to be state-of-the-art alien combat armor. The cassowary's powerful legs and razor-sharp claws made short work of the supposedly indestructible material. But we spent decades developing that armor. Zextal's skin had settled into a sickly shade of yellow. It's rated to withstand plasma weapons. Yeah, but did you rate it against murder birds? Sarah asked, trying and failing to keep a straight face. Rule number 1 of Earth. Everything here evolved to kill something else. Everything. The alien delegation started muttering among themselves in their various languages. The universal translators picked up fragments of increasingly panicked conversations. They live with these creatures? How do they survive? No wonder they developed space travel so quickly. They were trying to escape. Sarah exchanged an amused glance with James. Neither of them had the heart to tell the aliens that Australia was actually one of the tamer parts of Earth's history. No need to bring up the fact that humans had survived an ice age, multiple plague outbreaks, and had basically domesticated wolves because they looked cute. Should we show them the drop bears? James whispered. Let's not give them collective nervous breakdowns, Sarah whispered back. They haven't even seen what happened when their scouts tried to land in Canada during goose migration season. The footage on the display changed again, this time showing a group of the Vraxixi's most elite shock troops being chased across a beach by a mob of angry emus. The aliens had made the mistake of setting up a landing zone in Western Australia, apparently unaware of the Great Emu War of 1932 and its unfortunate outcome for the humans involved. This is impossible, muttered Dr. Nixovex, the Vraxi's lead xenobiologist. Our preliminary scans showed these were non-sentient creatures. They shouldn't be capable of coordinated tactical responses. Oh, those weren't coordinated tactical responses, James replied cheerfully. That's just Tuesday for them. You should see what happens when they're actually trying. The room fell silent as the implications of this sank in. Several of the alien diplomats began to look distinctly ill, their various physiologies displaying universal signs of distress. So, Sarah said, clapping her hands together, should we discuss terms of surrender, or would you like to see what happened when your secondary force tried to land in Brazil during Carnival? I have to warn you, though, that footage is much less family-friendly. Turns out your troops weren't prepared for the concept of party till you drop being taken literally. High Commander Zextal's skin had settled into a solid gray, a sign of total defeat among his species. Perhaps we should discuss terms. Excellent choice, Sarah nodded. First term. Earth is classified as a death world, Category 5, with extreme prejudice. Second term. You acknowledge that humans are certifiably insane for not only surviving here but actively choosing to stay. Third term. You sign up for our interstellar wildlife preservation program. Because, believe it or not, we've actually managed to keep most of these species from going extinct, and we're rather proud of that. You preserve them? On purpose? Admiral Yerxis looked like she was about to faint. Of course. They're part of our ecosystem. Speaking of which, wait until you hear about our conservation efforts for the great white sharks. We've got some lovely footage of your aquatic units encountering them off the coast of South Africa. The alien delegation collectively raised their various appendages in surrender before she could continue. Several of them were already drafting urgent messages to their homeworlds, most of which could be summarized as, "Do not mess with Earth. They're all insane and their planet is trying to kill them and somehow they're winning." Sarah sat back in her chair, trying not to look too smug. It wasn't every day you won an interstellar war without firing a single shot. Well, technically there had been shots fired, but mostly by startled aliens encountering their first kangaroo or cassowary. "So," she said, pulling up a standard peace treaty template on her tablet, "shall we make this official? And while we're at it, would anyone like to sign up for our guided tours? We've got some lovely packages that include safe viewing distances of various wildlife. Very popular with other alien species who've tried to invade and then decided tourism was a better option." James couldn't help adding, "We even include insurance for drop bear encounters in the premium package." "Drop bears?" Zextal asked weakly. "Oh yes," Sarah said with a perfectly straight face. "But don't worry about those for now. Let's focus on the treaty. Though I should mention, if you hear someone yell crikey during your stay, you should probably run. Just a friendly tip." As the alien delegation huddled together to discuss their options, Sarah pulled up her personal communication device and sent a quick message to the United Earth Defense Force. "Operation Wildlife Win Successful. Prepare welcome packages for our new tourist friends. And someone please tell Steve in Wildlife Services that his trained cassowaries deserve extra treats this week." The reply came back almost instantly. "Copy that. Also, the kangaroos are demanding overtime pay for the boxing matches. Something about professional courtesy." Sarah smiled and looked out the window at her beautiful, terrifying homeworld. Sometimes the best defense wasn't advanced technology or massive armies. Sometimes it was just having evolved on a planet that considered survival of the fittest to be more of a polite suggestion than a rule, and apex predator to be an entry-level position. "You know what the really funny part is?" she murmured to James as they watched the aliens sign the treaty with shaking appendages. "What's that? We haven't even told them about honey badgers yet." The collective shudder that ran through the alien delegation at the word honey suggested that perhaps some secrets were better left for the advanced tourism packages. After all, you had to leave something for the sequel. And somewhere in the Australian outback, a kangaroo picked up a piece of advanced alien technology with its paws, studied it for a moment, then used it to scratch its back before hopping away. The universe had a sense of humor after all, and today it was definitely laughing with Earth. Rule number 1 of the galaxy: don't mess with a species that not only survived their death world but decided to stay there because they liked it, especially if that species refers to some of the most dangerous creatures on their planet as cute. And this, esteemed visitors, is what we call a petting zoo. Sarah Chen managed to keep her professional tour guide smile firmly in place as she watched a group of Vraxi diplomats cautiously approach a fence containing several sheep. These are some of Earth's domesticated animals, specifically bred to be friendly and docile. High Commander Zextal, whose crystalline skin had finally settled into a more confident shade of blue after 3 weeks of carefully controlled Earth exposure therapy, raised what passed for an eyebrow. "You mean you deliberately modified these creatures to be non-lethal?" "Well, sort of." Sarah exchanged glances with James, who was trying very hard not to laugh. "It's called selective breeding. We basically chose the friendliest ones and let them have babies until we got what we wanted. Took a few thousand years, but here we are." "Fascinating," Dr. Nixovex muttered, furiously taking notes on her quantum pad. "And these sheep? They serve what purpose?" "Oh, lots of things. Wool for clothing, meat for food, lawn maintenance." Sarah paused as she noticed the alien's growing horror. "Right, sorry. Sometimes I forget that your species is photosynthetic. Different dietary needs and all that." A young Vraxixi scientist raised her hand. "But what about their defense mechanisms? Surely they must have some way to protect themselves." James couldn't help himself. "Well, they're really good at looking disappointed in you. Does that count?" The aliens gathered around the fence, their crystalline forms reflecting the afternoon sunlight as they studied the peaceful sheep grazing in the field. One particularly brave diplomat reached out with a tentacle-like appendage to touch a lamb's wool. "It's soft?" The diplomat sounded bewildered. "How does this help it survive?" "That's the neat part," Sarah said. "It doesn't need to. That's what we're here for. Welcome to the concept of human domestication, where we took some of Earth's creatures and said, you know what? You don't have to fight anymore. We'll handle that part." The aliens processed this information with their usual mix of horror and fascination. After the failed invasion attempt, many of their species had signed up for the Understanding Earth Cultural Exchange Program. though Sarah suspected it was more about trying to figure out how humans had survived long enough to develop space travel. And these are the same humans who have attack birds as pets? Admiral Yerxis asked, referring to the now infamous cassowary incident. Oh, you mean chickens? James grinned. Different birds, but yeah, we domesticated those too. Started with literally dinosaurs, ended up with something that gets upset if you don't feed it exactly at sunrise. The tour group collectively took a step back from the sheep enclosure. Perhaps, Zextal suggested carefully, we should move on to the next exhibit? The one you mentioned earlier about dogs? Sarah's face lit up. Oh, you're going to love this. So, remember how we talked about wolves yesterday? Well, about 30,000 years ago, some humans looked at these apex predators and thought, I bet they'd make great friends. The sound of multiple alien translators glitching at once filled the air. I'm sorry, Dr. Nixovex interrupted, her crystalline form flickering rapidly between colors. Are you suggesting that humans deliberately approached pack-hunting predators? For companionship? Yep! Sarah led them toward the dog enclosure. To be fair, it was probably more of a mutual decision. The wolves figured out that working with us meant regular meals, and we figured out that they were excellent at both hunting and cuddling. Win-win. The aliens watched in stunned silence as a group of various dog breeds played in their enclosure. A golden retriever bounded up to the fence, tail wagging furiously, causing several diplomats to jump back in alarm. Don't worry, James assured them. That's just Max. He's friendly. Well, unless you're a tennis ball, then you're in serious trouble. But it has teeth designed for tearing flesh, one of the younger scientists pointed out. Oh yeah, they kept those, Sarah nodded, along with their pack-hunting instincts, incredible sense of smell, and ability to track prey over long distances. But now they use those skills to help us find lost people, detect diseases, and play fetch. You weaponized friendship, Admiral Yerxis whispered in revelation. You took one of your planet's most efficient predators and turned it into a good boy, James finished for her, reaching through the fence to scratch Max behind the ears. The dog's tail wagging reached supersonic speeds. Sarah checked her schedule. Now, who's ready to learn about cats? Just wait until you hear about how we took solitary ambush predators and convinced them to live in our homes because they're cute when they're sleeping. The sound of multiple alien diplomats fainting at once was, Sarah had to admit, getting a bit old. But it was still funny. Should we tell them about how we basically created cats by accident? James whispered as their medical team attended to the unconscious aliens. You know the whole, they just showed up and decided to stay thing? Let's save that for the advanced course, Sarah whispered back. Right after the section on how we discovered which plants were safe to eat by, well, eating them. As the aliens were gradually revived and given emergency cups of their preferred nutritional solutions, Sarah couldn't help but smile. The Understanding Earth program was going better than anyone had expected. Sure, there had been a few hiccups, like the time they had to explain that yes, humans did sometimes keep venomous snakes as pets, and no, that wasn't even the strangest thing they domesticated. But overall, the program was achieving its primary goal, making sure nobody ever tried to invade Earth again. After all, any species crazy enough to look at their planet's most dangerous predators and think, I can work with this, was probably not a species you wanted to mess with. Next week, Sarah announced to the recovering group, we'll be covering the basics of human agriculture, including how we deliberately cultivate and eat plants that evolved specifically to prevent being eaten. The collective groan from the alien delegation suggested that maybe they should save the concept of caffeine for the graduate-level courses. Meanwhile, in the sheep paddock, a particularly woolly ewe watched the proceedings with what might have been amusement. After all, none of the aliens had figured out yet that Earth's domesticated animals weren't actually as harmless as they appeared. They just had better health care and retirement plans now. The universe might be vast and full of wonders, but only on Earth would you find a species that looked at everything trying to kill them, and decided the logical response was to make friends with it. And somehow, against all odds, that turned out to be the most terrifying survival strategy of all. Rule number 2 of the galaxy, newly added. If a species can turn apex predators into companions, do not. Under any circumstances, try to figure out what they could do with actual weapons. Today's lecture, Sarah announced to the packed auditorium of alien dignitaries, will cover human recreational activities and sports. A collective shudder ran through the audience. After 3 months of cultural exchange programs, they'd learned that any sentence containing the word human and any form of activity usually ended in existential dread. Now who can tell me what they know about human sports? Sarah looked expectantly at the crowd. Dr. Nixavex's crystalline form flickered nervously as she raised an appendage. According to our research, humans engage in ritualized combat for entertainment. Close. Sarah clicked to the first slide of her presentation. Though I wouldn't exactly call it combat, more like structured competition. The image showed a football stadium packed with cheering fans. Several aliens immediately activated their protective shields. Is this documentation of a war ritual? High Commander Zextal asked, his skin shifting to a worried amber. Nah, that's just a regular Sunday during football season, James chimed in from his position by the projector. Though try telling that to Eagles fans. Sarah shot him a look before continuing. What you're seeing is one of Earth's most popular sports. Two teams compete to move a ball across a field while the other team tries to stop them. Simple, really. And the crowd? Admiral Yerxis gestured to the sea of face-painted screaming humans in the image. They appear to be in some form of battle frenzy. Oh, those are just fans. They're having fun. The aliens exchanged worried glances. Their definition of fun had undergone several radical revisions since beginning their study of human culture. Moving on, Sarah clicked to the next slide. Here's what we call extreme sports. The image showed a human wingsuit flyer diving off a cliff. Half the auditorium promptly activated their emergency distress beacons. Please remain calm, Sarah said, trying not to laugh. I assure you, this is a completely voluntary recreational activity. They jump off high places. For entertainment? A young Vraxi scientist's voice cracked with disbelief. Well, yeah. I mean, we invented planes, and then decided that wasn't exciting enough, so we started jumping out of them. Sarah paused. Though to be fair, we did invent parachutes first. Usually. James muttered under his breath. Most of the time, anyway. But why? Dr. Nixavex had pulled out her quantum pad again, though her notes were becoming increasingly incoherent. What possible evolutionary advantage could be gained from deliberately placing oneself in mortal danger? Fun? Sarah shrugged. Also bragging rights, and social media likes. The next slide showed a group of surfers riding a massive wave. By now, several aliens had entered a meditative trance state, their universal translators repeating, "This cannot be real," in various languages. Now here's where it gets interesting, Sarah continued cheerfully. Some humans combine multiple sports for extra challenge. We call these triathlons, Ironman competitions, and ultramarathons. Multiple death challenges combined? Admiral Yerxis swayed slightly in her hover chair. Exactly. For example, an Ironman competition involves swimming 2.4 miles in open water, cycling 112 miles, and then running a full marathon of 26.2 miles, all in one day. The medical team stationed at the back of the auditorium began distributing emergency calming agents to the audience. But surely, Zextal interjected, his crystalline form barely maintaining coherence. These are your greatest warriors? Your elite military units? Nope, James grinned. Regular folks, teachers, office workers, retirees, anyone can sign up. Sarah nodded enthusiastically. In fact, our next slide shows the annual Cooper's Hill cheese rolling event, where people chase a wheel of cheese down an extremely steep hill, often resulting in multiple injuries. Cheese wheel? Dr. Nixavex's translator seemed to be struggling with the concept. Yeah, it's a pretty big wheel of cheese. Goes really fast down the hill. Lots of fun. And the purpose of this ritual is to catch the cheese, of course, Sarah beamed. Winner gets to keep it. The auditorium fell into stunned silence, broken only by the soft whir of medical scanners checking for signs of mass hallucination among the alien delegates. Perhaps, Admiral Yerxis suggested weakly, we should take a brief recess before discussing your species' concept of water parks? Oh, good idea, Sarah agreed. That'll give everyone time to prepare for the section on skateboarding, you know, where humans invented new ways to fall down on purpose. As the aliens filed out of the auditorium, many of them looking distinctly shell-shocked, James leaned over to Sarah. Should we tell them about parkour? Let's save that for the advanced seminar, she whispered back, right after we cover the history of human dance battles and competitive eating contests. Meanwhile, in the back of the auditorium, a group of young Vraxi scientists were huddled around a portable quantum computer, frantically updating their species' documentation on humans. The latest entry read, "Warning. Human recreational activities appear designed to deliberately challenge death itself. Current working theory. Humans evolved beyond natural selection by simply refusing to acknowledge its existence. Further research required, though all volunteers for direct observation must sign extensive waivers and undergo psychological evaluation. Below this, someone had added in smaller text. Note: their young practice these death-defying skills on designated playgrounds which appear purposefully designed to test their offspring's resilience through controlled falling scenarios. Recommendation: never attempt to invade a species that considers potentially fatal activities fun and teaches their children to laugh at gravity. Sarah checked her schedule for the next day's lecture. Introduction to Human Music Festivals and Mosh Pits. She made a mental note to double the number of medical staff on standby. After all, trying to explain the concept of crowd-surfing to a species that took everything literally was bound to be interesting. Rule number 3 of the galaxy, pending approval. If a species invented multiple ways to fall from great heights for fun, do not attempt to threaten them with physical harm. They have clearly transcended normal survival instincts and cannot be reasoned with through conventional means. Today's session, Sarah announced to the significantly smaller group of alien diplomats. Several had requested transfers after yesterday's extreme sports presentation. We'll cover human culinary practices and food culture. You mean your hunting rituals? High Commander Zextal asked nervously, his crystalline form already shifting to a cautious shade of pale green. Not exactly, Sarah smiled. Though we'll get to competitive eating later. First, let's talk about how humans discovered what was safe to eat. Dr. Nixivex's quantum pad was already recording. Surely you had scanning technology or chemical analysis. Nope, James chimed in cheerfully. Mostly we just tried eating things and waited to see if we died. The universal translators took several attempts to process this statement, apparently refusing to believe they'd heard it correctly the first time. You consumed unknown substances as a testing method? Admiral Yerxis looked like she was developing a new stress color. Well, yeah, Sarah nodded. How else were we going to figure out which mushrooms were food and which ones would kill us? Actually, that's a funny story. See, there are mushrooms that will kill you, mushrooms that will make you see gods, and mushrooms that taste great with pasta. The fun part was figuring out which was which. The medical team, now permanently stationed in the corner of every human cultural education session, began preemptively distributing anxiety medication. But wait, Sarah continued, pulling up a new slide. It gets better. Let me tell you about how we discovered coffee. Is this the stimulant substance you mentioned previously? Dr. Nixivex asked, her crystalline form vibrating slightly with nervous energy. Exactly. Legend has it, someone noticed their goats acting weird after eating certain berries. So naturally, they decided to try those berries themselves, then roast them, grind them up, and add hot water. The logical progression escapes me, Zextal admitted. Oh, that's nothing, James grinned. Wait until you hear about how we discovered milk was drinkable. Someone looked at a cow and thought, I'm going to drink whatever comes out of those dangly things. 3 aliens immediately entered emergency shutdown mode. Moving on, Sarah said quickly. Let's talk about some of humanity's more interesting culinary innovations. For example, cheese. Is this related to the cheese rolling incident? Admiral Euryxis asked warily. Kind of. See, cheese was basically discovered when someone left milk out until it went solid, and then they thought, hey, let's eat that. But here's the really fun part. Some types of cheese are supposed to contain mold. The medical team switched from distributing anxiety medication to actual sedatives. And then, Sarah continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing distress in her audience, there's fermentation. That's when we deliberately let things rot in very specific ways to create new foods and drinks. Sometimes it even makes things explode a little bit, but that's part of the fun. Explode? A young Vraxi scientist squeaked. Oh yeah, you should see what happens when you forget about a yogurt culture for too long. But that's nothing compared to brewing beer. Did you know humans discovered alcohol production on every continent independently? Apparently, our species just really liked drinking fermented plant juice that made us feel funny. James added helpfully. Don't forget about the spicy foods. You know, the plants that evolved capsaicin specifically to prevent mammals from eating them? Right, Sarah beamed. Humans tried those plants and were like, ouch, this causes physical pain. Let's add it to everything. Dr. Nixivex's notes had devolved into what appeared to be a series of increasingly distressed geometric patterns. But surely, Admiral Yerxis attempted. These are historical practices. From before you developed proper food production technologies? Oh no, we still do all of this, Sarah assured her. In fact, we've industrialized it. We have entire factories dedicated to aging milk into specific types of stinky cheese. We deliberately cultivate rice with a specific type of mold to make sake. We even have competitions to breed increasingly painful peppers. Competitions? To create more painful food? Zextal's translator seemed to be struggling with the concept. Absolutely. The current record holder is called the Carolina Reaper. It's so hot it can cause hallucinations. People eat them for fun and post videos online. The remaining conscious aliens began drafting urgent messages to their homeworlds, most of which contained variations of urgent, update. Humans explicitly seek out substances that cause pain and hallucinations for entertainment. Previous threat assessment severely underestimated. Recommend immediate upgrade to do not engage under any circumstances classification. Now, Sarah said, pulling up a new slide. Who wants to learn about fugu? It's a type of fish that's lethal if prepared incorrectly, so naturally we decided it should be a delicacy. The sound of multiple alien consciousness cores initiating emergency shutdown procedures filled the room. James leaned over to Sarah as the medical team rushed around. Maybe we should save the part about how we discovered eggs for another day? Probably wise, she agreed. I don't think they're ready to learn about how humans looked at things coming out of bird butts and thought, I bet that would taste great with bacon. Meanwhile, in the facility's cafeteria, a group of human chefs were preparing for next week's Introduction to Global Cuisine practical demonstration. The menu included surströmming, fermented herring that smells like chemical warfare, kasu marzu, cheese deliberately infested with live maggots, hakarl, fermented shark that smells like ammonia, ghost pepper ice cream, because why not combine extreme pain with dessert? The facility's insurance adjusters were already having panic attacks. Back in the lecture hall, as the aliens were gradually revived, Sarah prepared her notes for tomorrow's session. Human medicine, from walk it off to modern surgery. She made a mental note to triple the medical staff for that one. After all, trying to explain how humans discovered anesthesia, by basically drinking everything they could find until something worked, was bound to be interesting. Rule number 4 of the galaxy. Emergency edition. If a species deliberately seeks out substances that cause pain for enjoyment, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to understand their decision-making process. Accept that they operate on a level of consciousness that defies conventional logic and retreat immediately. Before we begin today's lecture on human medical history, Sarah announced to the now heavily sedated alien audience, I should mention that our medical team has developed a new emergency protocol specifically for this session. Is it that disturbing? High Commander Zextal asked, his crystalline form already showing stress fractures from the previous day's culinary revelations. Let's just say there's a reason we're starting with the modern era and working backwards, Sarah replied diplomatically. We thought it might be easier to handle if you understand where we ended up before learning how we got there. James activated the holographic display, showing a modern operating theater. This is what human surgery looks like today. Sterile environment, advanced monitoring equipment, precise instruments. Ah, Dr. Nixovex relaxed slightly. This seems quite reasonable and scientific. Exactly, Sarah nodded. Now let's look at how we got here. First slide, please, James. The image changed to a Victorian-era operating theater. Several aliens immediately activated their emergency shield generators. Are those people watching? Admiral Yerxus's translator crackled with horror. Oh yes, that's how medical students learned back then, Sarah explained cheerfully. They called them operating theaters for a reason. Sometimes they even sold tickets to the public. But the infection risk! Dr. Nixovex's notes were becoming increasingly agitated. Well, funny you should mention that, James chimed in. We didn't actually know about germs for most of human history. When doctors finally suggested washing hands might be important, a lot of people thought it was a ridiculous idea. The medical team began distributing their strongest calming agents. But surely, Zextal attempted, you had some form of pain management? Eventually, Sarah confirmed. Though for a long time, the main anesthetic options were drink until you pass out, or bite on this stick. We did experiment with various plants and fungi, though, mostly through trial and error. Trial and error? A young Vraxexi scientist's voice cracked. Yep, actually, that's how we discovered most of our early medicines. Someone would get sick, eat a random plant, and if they survived, we wrote it down for next time. The aliens' universal translators began displaying error messages, apparently unable to process the concept of such systematic recklessness. Oh, and here's a fun fact, James added. You know how we mentioned extreme sports yesterday? Well, a lot of modern emergency medicine developed because humans kept finding new ways to injure themselves, and doctors had to figure out how to put them back together. You advanced your medical knowledge through recreational injuries? Admiral Yerxes seemed to be developing a new color of distress. Partially, Sarah confirmed. Though war injuries contributed a lot too. Actually, that reminds me of an interesting story about how we discovered maggots could help clean wounds. 3 aliens immediately initiated emergency shutdown procedures. Maybe we should skip ahead to something less intense, Sarah suggested, noting the rising panic in the room. Like how we figured out that willow bark could help with pain, which eventually led to aspirin. You ate tree bark? For medicine? Dr. Nixvex's quantum pad was now recording what appeared to be a cry for help in fractal form. Well, yeah. I mean, how else were we going to figure out what worked? Actually, a lot of our modern medicines came from things that could kill you if you got the dose wrong. We just kept adjusting the amounts until we found the sweet spot between helpful and lethal. The medical team switched from distributing calming agents to actually installing temporary consciousness suppressors in the more sensitive audience members. But wait, Sarah continued enthusiastically. We haven't even gotten to the really interesting stuff, like how we discovered that moldy bread could sometimes cure infections, which eventually led to antibiotics. You deliberately consume decomposing food products as medicine? Zextal's crystalline form was developing concerning crack patterns. Oh, that's nothing, James grinned. Wait until you hear about trepanation. That's when people decided the best way to cure headaches was to drill holes in their skulls. The sound of multiple alien consciousness cores initiating emergency hibernation filled the room. Sarah checked her notes as the medical team rushed around. Maybe we should save the history of dentistry for another day. I don't think they're ready to learn about how we used to tie teeth to doors with string. Meanwhile, in the facility's research department, the alien scientists who had managed to maintain consciousness were updating their species' documentation on humans. Critical update. Human medical advancement appears to be driven by equal parts desperate necessity and shocking audacity. Current working theory. Humans evolved advanced healing capabilities not through natural selection, but by repeatedly surviving things that should have killed them until their bodies gave up and adapted out of sheer frustration. Below this, someone had added, Note: their approach to medical research can be summarized as, let's try this possibly lethal thing and see what happens. Recommendation: never attempt to engage in biological warfare with a species that turned their own near-death experiences into a peer-reviewed research methodology. As the aliens were gradually revived, Sarah prepared for tomorrow's session. Human entertainment, from gladiatorial combat to reality TV. She made a mental note to requisition an additional emergency response team, trying to explain how humans went from fighting lions for entertainment to voluntarily living in houses with strangers, while cameras recorded everything, was going to require some serious psychological support. Rule number 5 of the galaxy, medical advisory. If a species' medical history reads like a horror story but they somehow survive to achieve space travel, do not attempt to understand their physiological resilience. Accept that they have transcended conventional biological limitations through what appears to be sheer stubbornness, and avoid any conflicts that might require them to demonstrate this resilience personally. To be continued.